There are a few tricks you can do to get your pothos to grow much faster. We'll talk about pinning, propping, supporting and much more in a bit, but first, this fella here is the perfect example of a simple trick you can do to instantly 3x the size of your pothos. So last year, I bought 3 separate pothoses. Pothos? Anyway, they were a devil's ivy, a satin pothos and a neon pothos. On their own, they each cut a glum figure, small, alone and sad. Like most of us, all they needed was some friends, and I duly obliged. I popped them all together in the same pot and voila, a beautiful specimen was born, and I instantly had a pothos planter worthy of showing off to all my friends and family. If only they would pay attention. Anyway, but to do this, I took a risk. You'll have no doubt heard the old wives' tale about not repotting your plant into a pot that is too big. Only go one size bigger, they say. Too big and your plant will be on death's door. Well, here I broke that rule in spectacular fashion, and it doesn't look like a massacre has ensued. Quite the opposite, in fact. The trick to get around this is to pop your guy or gal into a pot with drainage holes, use soil that is free draining, and only water when the soil is dry. Simples. Get one of those things wrong and you may end up having problems. Now the beauty of all this is that you can have a play with the kinds of pothos you put in the pot. You don't have to stick to one type. And there are tons to choose from, so have a play. Right, you see this space here? This is a massive wasted opportunity. For a super bushy pothos, we want all the spaces in the pot to be filled with stems. There are a couple of options here. The first is pretty nifty, and all you need is a couple of bobby pins or something similar, and to grab a long stem of the plant. What we do is lie the stem on the soil, making sure each of the leaf nodes on the stem is making good contact with the soil underneath, and then pin the stem in place. The theory here is quite similar to air layering if you're familiar with that. Each of the nodes on the stem are making contact with soil, which encourages roots to sprout and after that new stems to grow. It's a simple and effective way of multiplying the number of stems in the pot and filling in all the gaps. You do want to make sure the stem is getting a fairly good amount of light, otherwise the leaves will just die off, so keep that in mind if you're about to pin a stem in the middle of an already bushy plant. Oh, and by the way, leaves dying off, browning or yellowing is one of the symptoms I cover in my free plant problems troubleshooting handbook that you can nab for free by following the link in the description or scanning the QR code here. It's got all your least favourite naughties and why they happen, and most importantly, what to do about it. Well worth having on your phone for when something untoward comes up. Check it out. The alternative way to get more stems on the go is taking cuttings. But don't panic, it's not too stressful. Instead of pinning, we take a cutting of a nice long stem piece, chop it down into single stem cuttings and propagate into a medium of your choice. A glass of water will do a grand enough job, or you can get fancy and set up a perlite prop box. Roots will probably take about 4 or 5 weeks to develop, and once they're a few inches long, plant them back in with the mother plant. If the cuttings are taking longer, then chances are they're not getting enough light. A Sansi grow light will be a good bet to move them along if your house is light deprived. The side effect of planting all these cuttings back in with the mother plant is root noodles. It'll be a right little root party in there, so you'll have to keep a beady eye on if it needs repotting more often. Now, you might have heard that pothos are great low light plants. And this is true, they are. In fact, Damien, the devil's ivy himself, participated in my mad zero light experiment I did last year and came through with aplomb. If you have no idea what video I'm talking about, then check out the link in the top right, it was a blast. Anywho, just because a plant is labelled as low light tolerant does not mean it will be happy and thriving. It just means it will grin and bear it. If Mrs. Sheffield was to tell her friends that she only tolerates me, then I know that the writing would be on the wall. No one or thing tolerates something that's living their best life. So basically, all plants love light. Well, all plants that I can think of anyway. They need it to survive after all. All that photosynthesizing malarkey they absolutely revel in. So grab that pothos that is living in the closet, literally that is, and move him nearer to the window. The mixed pothos planter I was talking about earlier would be even bushier if I didn't have this giant calathea lingering over it blocking all the rays. But space is low, so it'll have to do for now, I guess. If you have no idea what bright, medium or low light is, then the rule of thumb I like to go by is to see how much of the sky they can see. This planter can't see much of the sky because its near neighbour is lurching over it. This Pothos, on the other hand, gets a glorious view of the blue stuff and is happy as Lassie. We'll come back to Lassie in a bit because she's got a growth hack she's been dying to share with you.
So why am I bleating on about views of skies and whatnot?
It's because indoor plants suffer greatly when compared to their outdoor brethren, and it's all to do with the ceiling and walls that block off their view of the sky. Add a tree or two and the struggle is even more real.
Compare an indoor room to the great outdoors and honestly there's no comparison.
It's why sending your little guys for a summer holiday in the garden or balcony can do wonders for them. You might be thinking that light is great and all that, but what do we do about sunlight hitting the leaves?
Plants should be kept out of direct sun at all costs, right?
I refer back to Lassie, my plant friend. She sat right up on this windowsill shelf and basks in a good 6 hours of direct morning sun every day. Actually, that's an outrageous lie. It's probably sunny for about 2 days a week here, but you get the point. I experimented to see if Lassie would like to spend her day sunbathing, and she does. The leaves are getting bigger and stronger, which is the classic telltale sign.
Don't take this as a chuck your Pothos on your south-facing windowsill and be done with it if you're in the northern hemisphere though.
You'll need to experiment because it depends on your climate. Try a couple of hours a day for a week or two and see how she gets on. There are no hard and fast rules when it comes to plant care, and believe me, I wish there was, and these two plants will illustrate this perfectly. For this big fella, I'm in the habit of rotating every week so that all sides get to see the sky. But this lass, I most certainly don't. I leave her be. The reason is simple. I don't want Lassie to do the twist and shout.
Eh?
I've got her climbing this rather ugly looking moss pole or soil pole, and if I was to rotate her, she wouldn't stick to the path that I've set for her. She'll be wanting to climb around the back, and that's not really what we want. So for bushy suckers like this, rotate until your heart's content. It doesn't matter if the stems grow any which way, but leave climbers be. Obviously, I only get to enjoy Lassie's backside with the leaves hidden from view, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make to get the best plant. To get around this, I could place her against the wall so that I could enjoy all her foliage, but to be honest, I'm not that bothered.
So that growth hack that Lassie has been dying to share with you.
Please, Mr. Sheffield, let it be this week, she's been saying. Today is finally the day. It's all to do with the ugly moss pole. A plant climbing on an ugly moss pole will grow big and strong and have big muscular limbs. Stems and leaves, that is.
There are two reasons for this.
One, they prefer to grow vertically. It's how they grow in the wild, latching on to surrounding trees to climb up higher to get a decent view of the sky. And second, once they start climbing up something moist and soft, they latch their airy roots in to use as climbing anchors.
These become secondary points for the plant to access water and nutrients, and this strengthens the plant and the leaves really start to size up.
You can begin to see this with Lassie. The newer leaves are bigger than the bottom leaves. If you can bear the ugly plastic pole, then this is a great little hack. Now, you might be sat there thinking, why on earth have I put soil in this plastic cage? It's meant to be moss, right?
Let's call this a mad little experiment I've been doing to see what works better, moss or soil.
So far though, the soil one is driving me crazy, to be honest. Mess everywhere. It's easier to keep moist, but a real pain to clean up whenever soil goes all over the floor from when I brush past it. So the jury is still very much out.
You might be sat on your sofa thinking, why the bejesus hasn't he mentioned fertilizer yet? And to be honest, fertilizer isn't the biggest factor when it comes to fast growth.
Sure, fertilizer is great and you should be giving yours his Weetabix on a regular basis, but it won't make it grow quicker.
Not literally Weetabix, by the way.
Anyway, nutrients help a plant stay fit and healthy, but light is the biggest factor when it comes to speed of growth. Photosynthesis really is the key.
And you don't have to overthink the fertilizer you use. Just pick one that is suitable for indoor plants and it will do a grand enough job.
I use Houseplant Focus and my plants don't seem to mind it. To be honest, I've not noticed much difference compared to when I was using Miracle Grow. I switched because I couldn't really stand the heat in the comments.
And to keep it as simple as possible for my little brain, I used a little and often approach.
Which means I add a diluted dose to every watering can I fill. No need to remember what I did when.
Maximising growth is as much about not doing something to hinder the plant than it is to use funky hacks.
And keeping your little guy in a swamp really will do it little favours and you won't be 3xing its growth anytime soon.
It's dead easy to fall into the trap of watering every Saturday morning without checking the soil, But unfortunately, this will only lead to plant purgatory.
But I will admit, I sometimes fall into this trap too. I ended up giving this Pothos planter stinky toes from sitting in too much water by not checking the soil first. I know, shocking isn't it? It goes back to my pot point from earlier. This one is bigger than it probably should be, and there's lots of soil knocking about that tends to stay wetter for much longer.
Luckily, I caught it in time before too much damage was caused, and I vowed to always check before watering like a true SMP disciple.
This is all made so much easier when you use the right soil that drains freely. This is why I keep it simple and stick to soil mixes from Cybertanica, and I've got a link to a 10% discount you can check out in the description. They've done the hard work and put together a mix for pretty much all plant types, which is dead useful. We tend to look at the plant's foliage when deciding whether it's in tip-top condition or not, but the truth is most of the gritty action takes place below the surface.
A root-bound fella with dead or tired roots really won't be living his best life, so it's a good idea to have a peek every year or so.
If anything is looking black or severely tied up, then give them a new roomier home.
This then presents a conundrum that I see perplexing lots of beginners.
To water after repotting or not? I mean, what do you do if you only watered the plant yesterday? We don't want to overwater it, right?
Well, the answer to this might surprise you, and I go over all the details in the video here, so check it out.